validar el tema de, ¿verdad?, que se grabe. Y entonces, una vez arranquemos, ahí está, ya se está grabando la reunión. So, nuevamente, gracias por participar, gracias por estar aquí. The presentation is going to be held by Frederick Feit, and if something needs to be translated, si algo se tiene que traducir, Fred Mercado lo va a discutir, y también Waldo Acevedo está aquí con nosotros. Nuevamente agradezco la participación de todos ustedes, una participación bastante buena, eso es un buen indicio de que este proyecto puede ser un éxito, y este es el propósito de que cada vez que soltemos un RFP sobre los temas, pues vamos a hacer unos webinars para, ¿verdad? Vamos a hacer unos webinars para que ustedes también puedan recibir información. Si ustedes quieren también grabar la conversación, if you want to record it also from your part, you're free to do so. This is the purpose of this is being as transparent as possible. Okay, so habiendo dicho eso, I turn the floor to Frederick Feit and the Tilson team to start off this webinar meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, Enrique.
Yes, thank you very much, Enrique.
I'm sorry, Fred. Let me just a few housekeeping items. Please make sure, asegúrense que tienen el micrófono en mute para que no haya disruption mientras se está dando la presentación. Y si tienen alguna duda o una pregunta, pues levanten la mano en el chat y ahí entonces los van a estar llamando. Fred, I just was saying, put your mic on mute, and if you have any questions, just raise the hand so you can address them in the future. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, I really appreciate the introduction. As Enrique mentioned, if you have any questions, it'd be really helpful if you just keep yourself muted. However, as we go through this material, I will encourage you to ask questions as we go through them. We'll have 20 minutes to a half an hour at the end for a questions and answers period. But I would prefer to address questions kind of in context as we're going over anything in particular. I might be on full screen mode, so my colleague Fred Mercado, if I might ask you just to monitor the hand raising portion of Teams and the chat in case they have any questions that are typed into the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and just ask it the old-fashioned way, that would be fine as well. So I'm going to show a pretty short slide deck. I didn't want to bury everyone in slides, 17 slides, and then we'll have a look at some of the supporting application information that we'll be reviewing. So I'm going to do a screen share here just to get started. And I did want to point out initially that, let me just get rid of two erroneous windows. We'll revisit this website in a few minutes after the PowerPoint presentation, but I did want to point out that this is where all of the information relevant to this RFP, this program, is located. The intention is for the recording of this webinar to also be posted to this page, probably tomorrow. And the frequently asked questions and all of the information that we'll be going through. So smartisland.pr.gov, and the RFP itself is under the administrative tab, request for proposals. And here you will see the RFP itself. And we're going to be going over all of these other downloads after the PowerPoint presentation. But I felt that some of the things we'll cover in the PowerPoint will be a little bit more, a little easier to understand, just knowing that these documents exist. So there's a checklist document that's mostly for applicants' convenience to make sure that everything that's required for the application is included. A narrative template document just to make it a little easier to respond to the narrative portions of the application. So project workbook, which is an Excel file. We'll go over that in some detail right after the PowerPoint slides. And then there's a Excel file of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. We'll discuss that in a lot of detail. And then there's a KMZ file of the hotspot zones as well. So all that is here, and we will revisit that shortly. So I am going to go into presentation mode. And I'm assuming at this point in time, you can all see the PowerPoint presentations. And we will start. So thank you all for attending today. We're excited about this program, and it's a little bit different than some traditional broadband infrastructure grant programs, requests for proposals. So we do appreciate the opportunity to present the information in this webinar format. And of course, if there are any follow-up questions, we're here to assist. There's a frequently asked questions document. There's an email address to send frequently asked questions, but that's not the only avenue that you have to engage and seek additional information about this program. We can go over our contact information for that as well. So let's get into the details. So obviously here we're discussing the Smart Island program for public Wi-Fi and supporting wireless infrastructure. And I do want to point out that this is phase one. The intention here is to address all 78 municipalities. In this phase one, we have Wi-Fi hotspot zones associated with 47 municipalities. Thank you for my colleague Andrew for getting that number for me just a few minutes ago. And the remaining municipalities, either they'll come in one additional batch or more than one additional batch, but there will be a subsequent phase two, possibly phase three of this RFP, because the intention is to address the Wi-Fi hotspot zones and the additional supporting infrastructure in all 78 municipalities. So we'll keep you informed on the phase two. It's also worth pointing out that some of the information as an applicant that you provide for your phase one application can simply be repurposed for phase two, right? Some of the boilerplate information, the basic information. Okay, so I mentioned a moment ago that this RFP opportunity, this funding opportunity is unique. There are other similar examples, but there's definitely some aspects to this that are unique. So I want to take a moment at the very beginning and just make sure that we frame this appropriately. So what's the goal of this program? So this is a two-pronged approach, right? There are two parts to this RFP that go hand in hand. They overlap, they're part of the same thing, but there are two distinct parts. Part number one is to deploy public Wi-Fi hotspot zones in municipalities across Puerto Rico. Okay, so there's funding for the design, the implementation, and the supporting infrastructure for the Wi-Fi hotspot zones themselves. In addition to that, completely separate, and in addition to that, there is also funding available for additional infrastructure that supports fixed and or mobile wireless services. Okay, so the reason for that is according to the fourth bullet, we want to enable the long-term operations, maintenance, and upgrade of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones through revenue generated from the additional supporting infrastructure. We would assume that if this RFP was only for the deployment and operation of public Wi-Fi hotspot zones where the Wi-Fi service is free, that might not be attractive enough of an opportunity for the ISP community, and we certainly understand that. So the objective here is to solve the question that has been around for many, many, many years. How do you make public Wi-Fi hotspot zones sustainable over time? So here, the objective of the program is to make the Wi-Fi hotspot zone sustainable over time by also funding additional infrastructure that supports fixed or mobile wireless services, and understanding that the successful applicants will realize revenue on those assets where the capital costs are almost fully covered. And they can, if they choose, to use some of that revenue to offset the costs of the ongoing operations, maintenance, and upgrade of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. And successful applicants will have a long-term obligation to operate, maintain, and upgrade the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, a minimum of 10-year obligation. And we would certainly like to see applications that describe a path to even a longer-term operation of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. Okay, so two-pronged Wi-Fi hotspot zones, additional infrastructure supporting fixed wireless. So let's look at these two individually for the specifics. So each municipality has up to 3 Wi-Fi hotspot zones that are designated. There is mapping information for these. We have polygons for the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. And the intention of this program is to fund the design and the implementation, but not the ongoing operations costs directly, but the design and implementation of the Wi-Fi hotspot zone. So this includes the Wi-Fi radios themselves, of course, any structures that are necessary to mount the Wi-Fi radios, whether they be smart poles, smart furniture, what have you, traditional wooden poles or anything like that, as well as the power, primary and backup power for the Wi-Fi sites, as well as the backhaul for the Wi-Fi sites. Of course, the Wi-Fi zones will need backhaul, and that backhaul could be aerial fiber, it could be buried fiber, and it could be wireless backhaul. So part 1 of this, the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, is all-inclusive, everything that is necessary in terms of the upfront cost to design and deploy the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, including power, including structure, including backhaul. Okay. It's important to keep in mind the Wi-Fi hotspot zones are just that. These are zones, right? The information that is available are polygons of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. And it's certainly possible, quite likely, that many of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones will require more than one wireless access point in order to fully cover the Wi-Fi hotspot zone. And it is up to the applicant to determine how many access points are necessary and exactly where they would be located and how they will be mounted and things like that. So it is strongly encouraged that applicants do field visits to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones in the municipalities that you are interested in order to get a really good idea of the requirements involved. Okay, the second prong of this program is the additional supporting infrastructure. So just as the title implies, this is funding available for infrastructure that supports the underlying supporting infrastructure for fixed and or mobile broadband wireless service. So this includes structures. This includes whether again that's towers, monopoles, smart poles, anything like that. The aerial or buried fiber for backhaul, microwave backhaul, and primary and backup power systems. Okay, so these are this is additional infrastructure that does not need to provide Wi-Fi service, right? This is just the additional infrastructure that successful applicants will realize some revenue on, whether it's due to the final offering of a fixed wireless service or a mobile wireless service that will help justify the acceptance of the responsibility to provide long-term operations, maintenance, and upgrade to the Wi-Fi service. So these are areas that are outside of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. They do not need to offer Wi-Fi service. If you want to include Wi-Fi service at these locations, you can. We're not expecting that. The one thing, in addition, to point out, and this is an important part of the program, is that this program will not cover the cost of last mile equipment, right? It won't cover the cost of the fixed wireless equipment that communicates with customers or subscribers, or of the mobile wireless equipment itself. It will cover the infrastructure to support the deployment of last mile. So in the context of wireless, this is essentially middle mile infrastructure, middle mile backhaul, and the tower and structure and power infrastructure, but not the last mile infrastructure itself. This does have to do with the FCC Uniendo funding program and the fact that all housing units and small businesses in Puerto Rico have a federally enforceable commitment for last mile infrastructure. That's something of a complicated subject that we can discuss a little bit more at a more appropriate time. But for this program, we are covering the costs of supporting infrastructure, additional supporting infrastructure, but not the costs of last mile infrastructure itself. Okay. So the minimum biddable
David, you have a
units-
question? David?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's because I'm not an engineer, but what's the definition does the FCC or does this program have for last mile? Like, where does that, I understand where it ends. It ends at the Wi-Fi spot. What does it go back to? Like, if you have a big backhaul island-wide, core network, is there like a distribution network that it has to get to?
Well, ultimately, the backhaul solution is going to be up to the applicant. I mean, it will depend quite a lot on an applicant's existing infrastructure, existing owned and leased infrastructure. So it is up to the applicant to design and ultimately implement the backhaul.
Okay.
So that will be on a case-by-case basis, depending on the applicant. In terms of the first part of your question, last mile is in the context of wireless, for this program design, it is the wireless equipment that would actually communicate with a subscriber's customer premise equipment. And because of the Uniendo obligation, at this point in time, the decision for this program is to not directly fund last mile equipment. So not only the customer premise equipment, but the tower mounted last mile equipment that would communicate with it.
I was thinking more fiber, but I'm not sure you can get much more clear than that.
Well, let me give you one example. So if fiber is necessary for backhaul, whether it's backhaul of a Wi-Fi hotspot zone or backhaul for an additional supporting infrastructure site, if that backhaul fiber installation passes by a building, then it would be, it would certainly be allowable for the successful applicant to build a lateral off of that backhaul lateral, if you will, backhaul route to get to that building. Now that technically is a last mile drop, and not the cost of that drop itself is not covered under this program, but the backhaul fiber route can be utilized, can be leveraged to do building entries at the recipient's own cost going forward. So there's that's the important distinction, is those last mile drops would have to be at the recipient's expense, but the underlying middle mile infrastructure that passes those buildings would be funded under this grant program.
We have one more question from Kevin.
Thanks.
Kevin Lyman.
Yeah, hi, this is Kevin Lyman from SmartWave. So along those lines, so you can do infrastructure to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, and that's paid for, the infrastructure to that. But does that include the international internet connectivity, or is that part of the ongoing costs?
That would be an operational cost. So this
Okay.
program would pay for only capital costs, and that would be an operational cost, and that's why we're relying on revenue generated from this supporting additional infrastructure to be able to allow the provider to take on this long-term Wi-Fi zone operational responsibility, which includes, numerous operational expenses. It's the local backhaul, if you will, the international, the internet transit, all of that. So that's the goal here, is to try to implement the program that allows for the ongoing long-term operation of the Wi-Fi network, knowing that there is little revenue associated with the Wi-Fi network itself.
Yeah, and we've
One more
done.
question. I'm sorry.
Oh, in addition to that question, so and then as for a CP device in the homes, can that be purchased by the individual separately since it's not funded by this grant?
Yes, I assume so. The line in the sand here for this particular grant program is that the program is able to fund the underlying supporting infrastructure, but not the last mile infrastructure itself. So who funds that, whether it's, free installation, including free CPE, that really goes to the retail product specifications, right? Free install, free CPE with a 24-month contract, $10 a month for CPE, whatever the normal typical retail arrangement is probably applicable here, but that funding is not available from this particular grant program, not for CPE and not for the tower mounted radios that communicate directly with the CPE.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because we've done hundreds of smart zone deployments throughout the United States, and a lot of times the municipalities or the school districts will fund the broadband connectivity, providing Wi-Fi, basically best effort to the door. And then from there, like the individuals can purchase CPEs in those cases, or like it's just factored into the service going forward. So it makes a lot of sense what you're doing. And
if an alternate source of funding can be identified for last mile connectivity, whether it's a service subsidy or an equipment subsidy, then all the power to you to pursue those additional funding opportunities and complement the grant program with yet another form of capital or operating expenses.
Yeah. Okay.
We have one more question from Walter.
Hi, this is Walter Cannon with Zenfi Networks. Great, that sounds like a very exciting program. I've been visiting the island since DSL. actually saw a lot of DSL modems on the PT back in the day. So I have a question. We are running a program here in New York City area where we run into some issues sometimes with two things. Our biggest issues sometimes is with the community boards. And us deploying smart pole solutions and providing free Wi-Fi, because our smart pole solutions also support cellular. So is there some type of support we get from from the organization on that? And then secondly, is there any from an ongoing perspective, if we are supporting mobile, possibly private networking and other things, other revenue sources, is there a look for like a revenue share, or is that all that money come to the incumbent to whoever wins?
I'm glad you asked that, Walter. So I don't think I appropriately stressed the fact that the successful applicants, I'm just going to use the word recipients, can monetize the so-called additional infrastructure, the infrastructure that's built not within the Wi-Fi zones, but in additional to that. But recipients can also monetize infrastructure within the Wi-Fi zones themselves. So if where the Wi-Fi radios are mounted, you also mount, carrier neutral small cell sites, whether it's open radio access network or what have you, whether you're just renting the real estate or the power or the backhaul facilities. That infrastructure can be monetized as well. So, and there is no revenue share agreement required for either the Wi-Fi hotspot zones or for the additional infrastructure.
Okay.
The first part of your question, I'm not entirely clear on if there's local support in terms of the implementation.
Well, let me just try to. We get into issues about, if is it safe? Are you? Is this going to, give me brain cancer? So those types of questions are things that we get into, and we spend a lot of time and effort in trying to, diminish those types of issues that the local communities oftentimes don't want to have new technology in their neighborhoods, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, not in my backyard is something that you always have to deal with. I think that if new tower installations are proposed, then that could be an issue. If we are talking about improved backhaul to existing tower sites, improved power and backup power at existing tower sites, that might not be as much of a hot button issue. But yeah, certainly, the health concerns of 5G are something that we see a lot, but it seems to have waned a little bit in the past year or so. Fewer pictures of glowing unicorns on people's front lawns online and stuff like that.
One last question. Do we need well, for right now, do we need to have, like, at every smart pole, are you thinking that we have to have backup power as well as primary power? Like if I go into Ponce and I go down the street and I want to deploy 10 of them or 100 of them, do I have to have backup power to every one?
So I'll ask my colleague Andrew Decker to correct me if I say something incorrect, but in the RFP document itself, there are technical specifications for the Wi-Fi hotspot access point installations, and I believe we are specifying 4 hours of battery backup power at each location. If that is completely not feasible, then submit your proposal and specify why. But the intention of this program is to have these systems as robust as possible. I mean, obviously, there are very significant issues in Puerto Rico with the not only storm damage, but also with the performance of the commercial electrical grid. And these Wi-Fi hotspot zones are the places that people will flock to when their internet is out at their home. And we want a high level of availability at these sites.
These hotspots are all outside, right? These are not in building.
No, by and large, most of them are outside, but a few are in building. Yes, it's important to note that the municipalities themselves chose the Wi-Fi hotspot zones.
Oh, that's good.
So
that's good.
Yes,
that's great.
There was a very significant outreach effort, and the municipalities themselves are specifying these based on where they think the community will benefit the most.
Awesome. Thank you.
Douglas, you had a question?
No, Fred, you just you raised the point I was going to mention, that the municipalities participated in identifying these polygons on the map.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah, it's a very important part of this, right? I mean, it's
and that's the reason why we have not all of them, right? We still are missing some of the input from the municipalities, and that's why we're dividing in phases, because unfortunately, not all 78 municipalities provided the answer we were expecting.
But we are going to attempt to address that for all 78 municipalities in the coming rounds. Okay, let me move on
questions.
to.
No more questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said no more questions. Go ahead.
Oh, no more. Okay, great. Well, I am very pleased with the robust conversation. Thank you very much. Sometimes these webinars can be a little dry. So, but in the interest of time, let me cover a few more slides. But continue with the questions, please. Minimum biddable unit is a municipality. As I mentioned earlier, we in phase one, the current round, if you will, of this RFP, we have 47 municipalities identified. So the minimum biddable unit is a municipality, which means that if a municipality has 3 Wi-Fi hotspot zones specified, then you would have to agree to design, deploy, and operate all 3. And only if you agree to do that, deploy and operate all the hotspot zones identified in a municipality, only if you do that can you then request funding for additional supporting infrastructure elsewhere in that municipality. And we certainly encourage you to look at this as a larger regional opportunity, maybe gang a few municipalities together and look at it in terms of a larger regional opportunity. But that's up to the applicants with the caveat that the minimum biddable unit is a single municipality. The period of performance. So this is looked at in 2 phases because of the ongoing operation commitment. But phase 1, the typical period of performance for construction is 18 months, and that commences upon the completion of the grant disbursement agreement between recipients and OMB. An extension to the 18-month construction period of performance is possible due to unforeseen circumstances, whether they be weather-related, supply chain-related, perhaps permitting and such. So we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis after award. For the phase 2 network operations period of performance, recipients will have a minimum of a 10-year obligation to operate, maintain, and upgrade the Wi-Fi hotspots. I've used the phrase upgrade a few times. We are not dictating the upgrade timeline, but we do want to see that information from the applicants as part of their narrative, right? We want to, see what your suggested plan is for maintenance and upgrade of the public Wi-Fi hotspots. And we would like to see applications that indicate an ability to operate the Wi-Fi hotspots for longer than 10 years, but that's the minimum requirement. It's worth pointing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
We have a couple questions.
I'll just finish the statement. I don't have a separate slide for reporting requirements. However, there will be reporting requirements within each of these phases, quarterly reporting requirements during phase 1, just to keep OMB informed on construction progress, permitting progress, things like that. And of course, phase 2, during the 10-year period of performance, the reporting requirements won't be quarterly because it's a 10-year obligation. It's a long time. But at the discretion of the OMB, obviously, they're going to remain interested in the status of the hotspot zones, their level of maintenance and operation, the uptime, the usage, how useful are they proving to be to the community? How utilized are they? So there will be some reporting requirements within each one of these phases. Yeah, let's take a couple of additional questions.
Yeah, we have a question from Anna Clemente.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Anna. My first question is, those 18 months that you have on phase 1 are for construction of the hotspot and the additional infrastructure, or only the hotspots?
Or both.
Okay. And then my next question is on the phase 2 or the other phases that you're gonna have. That means that the municipalities that already have their zones selected will not be able to add any more zonings to that municipality. For example, San Juan already have a zone, so we will not see any more new hotspot zones in San Juan. Is that correct?
To the best of my understanding, that is correct. At least at this stage, until the all 78 municipalities are represented in this opportunity. Perhaps after all 78 municipalities are represented, then it's possible that the RFP could be reintroduced for additional Wi-Fi hotspot zones, but I don't think we have made that decision. I don't think OMB or the Puerto Rico Broadband Program has made that decision yet. Waldo, if you'd like to expand on that at all, I'd be
Precisely
happy.
what you mentioned, right? It's we're concentrating 3 at the beginning. Then after the project is completed, we'll revisit and see the possibility of extending it.
Okay, thank you. With new funding, right?
Correct.
Maybe?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you for your questions.
Walter again.
Sorry, I don't want to
We're gonna have to
monopolize it.
charge you, Walter.
I know, man. So just one quick question. If we wanted to, especially like an area like San Juan, deploy more smart poles or more Wi-Fi than just the one, knowing that we're only going to get funded for the one, will we be able to?
Certainly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason why not.
Well, as long as it's not last mile, right, Fred?
Well, yeah, I mean, so as long as it's not last mile, and as long as it's, I mean, you can spend money on last mile infrastructure. Just that at this point in time, you can't spend the Puerto Rico broadband infrastructure funding on last mile through this grant program. Also,
No,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I totally understand that. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Also, the deployment of the Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is yes, it could be considered a last mile technology, but it is in this little bit of a gray area of, and especially the way that we're trying to implement it here as public Wi-Fi hotspots. It's not meant to be a direct substitute for broadband at people's residences, right? Maybe it'll be an available spot of broadband when there are occasional outages at residential locations, but largely it's for in areas where there are a congregation of people in public areas. Okay, Fred, any additional questions at this point?
We're good to go. Good to go.
All right.
Oh, wait, I spoke too soon. We have David Ruiz.
Hi, just one quick question. The cost of the capacity or bandwidth is going to be funded or not?
Not. That will be an operational expense, and that would have to fit into your financial model of being able to leverage the additional supporting infrastructure well enough to supply enough revenue to cover the costs in part of the bandwidth necessary. But yes, that would be the actual, transport costs and bandwidth internet transit costs are operational expenses not covered by this program.
But any additional capacity you have on the backhaul can be monetized if the primary function is covered, correct?
Yes, that is correct. So if new fiber infrastructure is required, you could certainly monetize the new fiber infrastructure. If a fiber IRU was required, then that's an expense that can be capitalized. So that's an eligible expense, and then you would have to pay for the bandwidth on that IRU'd fiber once you get to an internet point of presence or a submarine cable landing station, something like that. But you could also monetize additional fiber capacity on that IRU'd fiber. But the cost of bandwidth, the cost of internet transit is an operational expense that's not covered by this program. But the intention, of course, is for revenue from the additional supporting infrastructure being sufficient to justify accepting the obligation for operating the Wi-Fi hotspots, including providing the bandwidth for them.
And in the requirements are specified the maximum or minimum bandwidth for each hotspot?
Yes, in the
okay.
in the RFP technical specifications section, you'll find that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
One more question from Noel.
Yes. So is there any relationship between the amount of funds requested for the Wi-Fi infrastructure and Wi-Fi zone versus the infrastructure not related directly to those Wi-Fi zones? Is there any limitations or something there?
Thank you. That's a very good question. No, there is no direct relationship. There's no formula, right? There's no limitation on the amount of funding requested in additional infrastructure. However, even though there's no formula tying it to the Wi-Fi spend or maximum, we will be evaluating the additional infrastructure that you're requesting, right? One of the slides coming up will speak to that, but basically we want the additional infrastructure to do a few things, right? We want it to improve resiliency and redundancy. We want it to facilitate the expansion of fixed and mobile services into areas where those services are not currently available. So we will scrutinize the additional infrastructure that you propose, and we will make a determination as to the relevance of it, the importance of it to the communities, and act accordingly.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay. On the subject of matching funds, so no matching funds are required for this program. However, I'm going to be a little repetitive on a few points, but this because they're the most important points. But it is expected that applicants will provide last mile fixed wireless equipment or mobile wireless infrastructure in conjunction with the additional supporting infrastructure, right? So the grant program can pay for towers or structures or structural modifications and improvements to existing towers and backhaul and power. But then it is an assumption of this program and expectation that the recipients will provide the last mile infrastructure at their cost, or the mobile infrastructure at their cost, and that is sort of the not quite matching funds requirement, but we do realize that there will be a capital expense incurred by recipients, successful applicants, and that's as a result we're not instituting an additional matching fund requirement. We want this to be approachable. Okay. And of course, as the third bullet suggests, it is expected that applicants will leverage revenue generated from program-funded supporting infrastructure to offset operating costs of the public Wi-Fi zones. All right, about halfway through the slides. So just in general terms, just to kind of take a step back at the moment, after discussing some of the details. So what are the basic objectives of the grant program? So it's to provide free standard Wi-Fi 6 with an upgrade path to Wi-Fi 7 in the designated areas. These are the Wi-Fi hotspot zones that are identified. And infrastructure supporting the deployment of broadband fixed and mobile wireless services. These are the additional supporting infrastructure. That's the goal. More specifically, it's in addition to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, to support the deployment of the underlying supporting infrastructure, such as smart poles, towers, power, and backhaul, but not last mile or mobile equipment, right? That's our line in the sand. And it is the objective of this program that the additional supporting infrastructure will be deployed strategically for the purposes of improving network redundancy, resiliency, and improve the performance and affordability and expand coverage of the existing networks, or if it's not the expansion of an existing network, we still want to see that level of redundancy and resiliency as part of the application. So we are looking for something fairly specific with the additional supporting infrastructure, and it actually the rurality of the additional supporting infrastructure is one of the scored criteria, and I'll have a slide on that in just a moment. All right, so this is one of the things that I'm going to repeat more than once. This is one of the most important points, but it is the anticipation, the goal of this program, that revenue generated from the supporting infrastructure, which includes the supporting Wi-Fi infrastructure, as Walter mentioned earlier, right? You could possibly monetize those locations for, small cell, neutral host, or what have you. So the supporting infrastructure and the additional infrastructure will help support the ongoing costs of the operations, maintenance, and upgrades of the public Wi-Fi network, right? That's key. I know I'm being very repetitive, but that's really the goal here, is to figure out, right, to try to find the solution to long-term public Wi-Fi network sustainability. I mean, there are quite a few examples of municipal or otherwise public Wi-Fi networks that are mothballed or shuttered over time just because they cannot afford the ongoing operations costs any longer. And applications that demonstrate a sustainable business plan for the long-term public Wi-Fi network operations will be preferred. All right. So this next slide is important. I think most of you are probably familiar with the paradigm nowadays, which basically links a requirement for affordability, an affordable service, to the availability of infrastructure grant awards, infrastructure grant funding. And we are very serious about this as well. It's one thing to fund an expansion of infrastructure, but it's another thing if the retail services provided over the infrastructure are, remain unaffordable to end users. So these are the affordability and subsidized services requirements for the program. Applicants must participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program, subsidy program. That's the FCC program. If you're not currently registered, if you're not currently one of the qualified ACP participants, that's okay. You can still apply. But by the time you need to enter into a grant disbursement agreement or receive an award out of this program, you will need to be an ACP subsidized provider. From applicable funded infrastructure, so this is going to be on a case-by-case basis, because there's going to be some infrastructure that you request funding for legitimately, where it will be unusual to enforce this requirement. So, some locations it will be obvious: new towers, improved towers, smart poles, things like that. Other areas it might not be quite as obvious, but we will look at it on a case-by-case basis. But from applicable funded infrastructure, successful applicants must offer a service only to ACP qualified households. You do not need to offer this service to every single subscriber, but to ACP qualified households, you need to offer a service that is fully subsidized under the ACP program. And you'll need to do that for 3 years. If the infrastructure is fixed, then the fully subsidized service must be a minimum of 25 by 3, no caps, no data caps. And if the underlying service that's made possible through the additional supporting infrastructure is a mobile service, then that fully subsidized service must be unlimited talk and text, unlimited data, 5G where available, and 10 gigabytes per month in hotspot activity. Right, this is 10 gigabytes is still not enough for somebody to use their mobile service for working from home, but it will allow them to occasionally supplement or replace their fixed service if there's an outage. That's the reasoning behind that. Now, it's possible that you request funding for a site such as a tower that only serves as a middle mile handoff type of tower, right? And it does not provide any last mile like services. And obviously that's probably one of the clearer examples of a location that's not applicable, where, you know, subscribers served from that location would not be subject to this requirement. But affordability mandated for infrastructure grant funds is it is the new normal, and we think it's a very important provision here. In addition
we
to
have one question. We have one question,
Okay.
Fred, from Melissa.
Hi, yeah, Melissa from Neptuno. Just a quick question regarding ACP subsidy program. There's these rumors going around that maybe ACP won't make it past the summer of 2024. So are there any thoughts on what would happen if, in fact, ACP has no more funding available for the subsidies after summer 2024, being that the RFP is asking for 3 years?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. We're getting really good questions today. Thank you very much. In the RFP itself, the wording is, I guess, for in the interest of brevity, I did not include it on the slide, but the wording in the RFP is must participate in the ACP subsidy program and its successor program. And that's language that is found in some federal grant programs. I think it's part of the, you know, the ARPA Capital Projects Fund and IIJA BEAD funding. But yes, the ACP program is, you know, was funded with $14.2 billion. It's a lot of money, but it will run out. And there has not been any successor program identified yet. But it's worth noting the ACP program is a successor program itself, right? It started out with the EBB program, and the ACP program is its successor program. So, you know, we don't have good visibility. I don't think anyone does in terms of what the ACP successor program will be, and any of the specifics behind it. But regardless, we are going to assume that there will be a successor program, and we will assume that this provision will be enforceable for the 3-year period. If ACP runs out of money and there is zero successor program, then obviously this provision is going to be difficult to enforce. Granted.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. In addition to the requirements for an affordable service, a service fully subsidized under ACP, there are performance requirements for the equipment that applicants, recipients will install in conjunction with the additional supporting infrastructure, even though you will be paying for this, and these are not paid for out of grant funding. All of the supporting infrastructure that this equipment will be tied to, right? The power, the backhaul, will be part of the grant program. So we will require that any last mile or mobile equipment meet minimum performance requirements. I think these are pretty benign. I really doubt that you would be installing equipment that's capable of less than these maximum performance requirements. But fixed service wireless equipment must be capable of at least 100 by 20 service, you know, depending on the signal strength available at end user locations, right? And mobile equipment or mobile service facilitated by the infrastructure, additional supporting infrastructure, must be 5G equipment, right? 5G capable. We just don't want past generation equipment being utilized. For applications that request funding for
I have one more
buried,
question, Fred. I have one more
Okay.
question. Walter
Go
has a
ahead.
question. Walter? You're mute.
You know, mostly everyone still is running a 4G cores. You know, while they might say it's 5G, everybody is still running 4G cores. So how do we guarantee that? Are we responsible for, you know, upgrading to a 5G core?
No, we can't. We can't require an upgrade of the entire core infrastructure, but the nodes that are installed at the locations, the applicable locations, need to be 5G capable. When the core is upgraded to 5G, then those sites will be you know, will be able to be more fully leveraged. But it's not within the, you know, eligible funding to upgrade a 4G core to a 5G core, and it's not a requirement that applicants do so. Okay, so for applications that are requesting
One more question
funding-
from, sorry,
Okay.
Fred. One more
Sure, no
question
worries.
from Anna.
Right ahead.
My question is regarding the two previous slides, the performance requirements and the affordability subsidized services. I want to make sure I understand. What you mean by this is that even though the ACP requirements is 25.3 for fixed wireless, the requirement is that whoever receives the funds provides a minimum of 25.3 or a minimum of 120. What is the real requirement there?
Sure. Thank you. I'm glad to be able to clarify that. So the minimum requirement for the hardware that's installed for fixed wireless needs to be, it needs to be capable of providing 100 by 20 service. That's the performance capabilities of the fixed wireless electronics that you install.
Okay.
So that does not mean that you have to offer a 100 by 20 service. It just means that the radios, the electronics that you install need to be capable of it. So we would just want to, you know a make and model of the radios, maybe do a specification sheet from the manufacturer, whether it's, you know, Telerad or Cambian or whatever it might be. And I think most fixed wireless equipment at this point in time is certainly capable of providing 100 by 20 service. So that refers to the capacity or the capability of the equipment that you install on the supporting additional supporting infrastructure. In terms of the subsidized service, so using the equipment that's capable of providing 100 by 20 service, the requirement is for ACP qualified households, you need to offer a service of 25 by 3, minimum of 25 by 3 with no data caps, that is fully subsidized under the ACP program. Now, the ACP program currently in Puerto Rico is a $30 per month subsidy for qualified households. So that effectively means that to ACP qualified households, you need to offer 25 by 3 service at $30 a month. But you only need to offer it to ACP qualified households. It does not need to be made available to those households that do not qualify for the ACP subsidy.
Super. Thank you very much, Fred.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the question. We went through performance requirements. We're up to the joint trench agreement, joint trench requirement, potential joint trench requirement. So for applicants that are seeking funding for buried fiber backhaul infrastructure on a case-by-case basis in the name of efficient trenching and things related to a dig that you would normally see in a dig once policy, it's possible that applicants will be required to enter into a joint trench agreement with the Commonwealth. To the extent that there will likely need to be, again, on a case-by-case basis, there would likely need to be some joint engineering effort to make sure that there's the addition of some additional conduit and some handholds that allow access to that additional conduit. This is more likely for buried fiber backhaul on longer routes. Very short sections of buried fiber backhaul probably wouldn't necessitate this, but again, it's on a case-by-case basis. We want to embrace, again, as I mentioned before, we want to embrace things that are typically found in joint trench agreements, the efficiencies of not having to go back and dig the streets up again, the inconveniences to the residents of having to, not have to, dig up the streets again, and of course the cost savings in being able to install conduit in an open trench. So that's something to keep in mind, and that will likely be applicable to longer sections of underground fiber backhaul, but not exclusively, case-by-case basis. Okay, so we have published the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, the polygons of them for the 47 municipalities. Last time I checked, there was approximately 135 zones. I think there was a modification over the past 2 days. So it's approximately 135 zones. And as stated earlier, we think a very important aspect of this program and the process that was followed was that every municipality specified their own Wi-Fi hotspot zones. So that information came from a local source, and accordingly, it's the local political leaders and others, community leaders who have given their opinion as to where these Wi-Fi hotspot zones should be. As a result, we have not visited all of these locations yet. We plan to. We want to be as well informed of these locations as applicants will be over the next few weeks. But it is possible that some of these Wi-Fi hotspot zones are not as optimized as they can be, right? And it's strongly encouraged that applicants perform site visits to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones in the municipalities that you're interested in. And if you think it's important to, as part of your proposal, part of your application, to suggest any modifications to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones as they are currently depicted, you are encouraged to do so. We would like your input on this. So maybe this is limited to just the perimeter, the border of the polygons as currently described. Maybe they're too big and there's no reason for them to be so big because no people will actually be in part of it. Maybe they're too small, and maybe there needs to be better coverage in the parking lot of a particular facility and not at the facility itself. Whatever input that you have in the general spirit of optimizing the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, we will appreciate your feedback. Now, optimization doesn't mean shrinking down the size of them to lower the costs of the spend or of the backhaul required, of the internet transit required, but it means optimizing to so that they are more useful to the community and the residents of the municipalities. Okay. The program timeline. The RFP was published in conjunction with the Smart Islands Summit, which was a really great event on the 12th. Obviously, we're conducting the webinar currently. All of the information necessary to prepare the response is currently published on the smartireland.pr.gov website. The deadline for submission for phase 1 for this phase of 47 municipalities is June 23rd, right? And we expect awardees to begin to be notified approximately August 18th. I doubt all notifications of awards will occur on one day, but that will likely be the approximate starting date of awards. And the grant period for phase 1, the 18-month period of performance, keeping in mind that an extension of the 18-month period of performance is possible due to extenuating circumstances such as weather, supply chain issues, permitting issues, things like that. But that's an 18-month period of performance. That begins on the day of execution of the grant disbursement agreement between recipients and OMB. And the phase 2 of the grant program is the 10-year operational period, and technically that will begin once the phase 1 is complete, once the construction is completed, and once the network acceptance and testing, so to speak. There will be required testing and acceptance process of at least the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, right? So once that is complete, then the 10-year operational period begins. And just 3 more slides here. So 2 slides on the scoring criteria. We're trying to make this relatively simple. We don't want to get into really complex formulaic scoring criteria. So we have quite a few basically pass-fail scoring criteria, and then on the next slide there are the 3 scoring criteria, 3 or 4, that are actually numerically scored. But we're going to be looking at project cost, the applicant's Wi-Fi service capabilities. Now it's not implied that applicants need to have extensive Wi-Fi network operational experience, but we are assuming applicants will have significant broadband wireless experience. Maybe it's not Wi-Fi, maybe it's LTE or it's mobile or a fixed LTE optimized for fixed service, things like that. But we are looking for expertise, experience in broadband wireless operations. Financials, the monetization, the operations and maintenance, and the additional services you plan to offer over the additional supporting infrastructure implementation plan, network design plan. All of these are explained in quite a bit of detail in the RFP, exactly what is required here. Applicant references, your network testing plan, which is to do with the Wi-Fi network testing plan, service level agreement for the Wi-Fi network, and reporting analytics. As I mentioned before, phase 1 will require quarterly reporting. Phase 2, the 10-year operations, will require less frequent reporting at the discretion of the OMB, but they'll be interested in Wi-Fi hotspot utilization.
We have one question. We have one question pending from David.
Yeah, hi. I apologize if I've missed this in the reading, but I just don't recall seeing. Is there an overall funding for this phase? Like how much? And in terms of project cost, obviously, I think it'll vary depending on the infrastructure some people have versus others. And if that's a pass-fail, if one person says, well, I got to build out a lot of it, and so it's going to be maybe 4 times more expensive than another, how does the pass-fail work? And I guess, is there an overall funding for this program?
Yeah, I'll answer the second. I'll just answer the first part first. It's easier. So, we're going to look at the applications on a case-by-case basis. So, in terms of project cost, we will look for cost reasonableness. Each applicant is going to suggest something different from other applicants. We would assume so. So in order to compare apples to apples, we want to, it will depend on the number of miles of underground fiber, the number of miles of aerial, the number of new structures, the robustness of the backup power that's being described. But in general, we're looking for overall cost reasonableness. Not to do with the total price tag of the suggested service, but of the component parts, right? We're looking at You know, are they suggesting that underground construction is going to be, you know, $120,000 a mile, or is an applicant suggesting that underground construction is going to be $600,000 a mile? Right, one of those is pass, one of those is probably fail. Right.
Right.
So that's the type of project cost analysis we're going to do. It's not like we're looking at, you know, well, one application is suggesting a $300,000 project in this municipality, and another applicant's suggesting a $3 million project in this municipality. The lower bid is not automatically the winner. That is not what we're looking at. We're looking at total, you know, the total effectiveness. If the amount of infrastructure and the impact to the community is justified with the larger spend, then perhaps that application will be successful. So we're looking at more like component project costs for cost reasonableness. In terms of total allocation for the project, Waldo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe so far $50 million is appropriated or earmarked for this, but that means for all phases, not just this phase one for the 47 municipalities, but the remaining ones as well.
50 million. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
And let me just go on to the second to last slide. This one's not formatting so well, my apologies, but we can see all of the text. So these are the scored criteria. There are 4 scored criteria. So Wi-Fi sustainability. This is to do with the applicant's ability to demonstrate that, I'll use the phrase, revenue generated from the additional supporting infrastructure will provide sustainable operations, the ability for applicants, recipients to sustainably operate the Wi-Fi network over a long period of time. Now, if you know, it's up to the applicant how to pay for the operational costs of the Wi-Fi network. If it's directly from a portion of revenue from the additional supporting infrastructure, so be it. If it's, you know, if the additional supporting revenue from the additional supporting infrastructure is simply, you know, injected into the you know, the applicant's, you know, overall, you don't have to account for it separately, right? You don't have to demonstrate that the, you know, infrastructure only from the additional supporting revenue from only the additional supporting infrastructure is necessary or available for the Wi-Fi sustainability. But either that or you otherwise demonstrate a path to long-term sustainable operations and maintenance and upgrade of the Wi-Fi network, right? That's the key point here, is how do we crack that nut of making public Wi-Fi networks sustainable over a long period of time. The second,
Right, just for timekeeping purpose,
yep,
for about 40 minutes, and we still haven't worked on any of the documents, just to make you aware.
Yep.
The time perspective.
Thank you, Waldo. We've been receiving a lot of questions along the line here, so I don't think we're going to need quite as much time at the end.
Okay.
But encourage everyone to submit any questions to the FAQ question. But I'll go through this last part pretty quickly. Project rurality. So, you know, there's already infrastructure in more densely populated areas. You know, we are looking to bring service, reliable, redundant service, affordable service to locations that are currently underrepresented, and that will be scored accordingly. There's a local business preference. So for those businesses currently providing wireless service in Puerto Rico, and then marketing plan and materials, right? The presence of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones and the services and the affordable services enabled by the new infrastructure, great, but so consumer awareness of those services is also key. So we were looking at marketing plan and materials for both the Wi-Fi hotspot zones and the additional services that will be facilitated from the additional infrastructure. All right, so now let's have a look at the other application materials, program workbook, narrative template, checklist. And I just wanted to have a separate line item here. Within the checklist, this is mentioned, but we are requesting GIS data. And of course, in the RFP itself, it is specified we are looking for GIS data from applicants. So basically, there will be 3 buckets of information that you will provide to us for a complete application, right? One of which is the program workbook. We'll have a look at that right now. It's an Excel file. The other bucket of the 3 is the narrative template. So part of the application, you have to provide narrative answers, and we're going to provide you with a template. So that's relatively easy for you, or straightforward. It might not be easy. And then the third bucket for deliverables are attachments of supporting documents, required documents, and then optional supporting documents if you choose. So you'll upload a copy of the workbook once it's completed. You'll upload a copy of your narrative template once it's completed, no longer a template. And then you'll upload whatever additional supporting documents are necessary to complete the application. And included in that is GIS data. So for additional structures, or even if there's structural modifications to existing towers, we'll want that data. We'll want points for structures, and we're going to want paths for backhaul, whether it's aerial fiber, underground fiber, or even microwave links. We will want to see those paths and points. So at this point in time, I'm going to back out of this screen, and we're going to go back to the smartisland.pr.gov website. And over here, you will find all of those documents that are necessary to help you complete the application. So here's the RFP itself, of course. The checklist, in the interest of time, I'm not going to open up the checklist or the narrative template. If we have a little time, closer to 4 p.m., I will do that. But I mostly want to show you the project workbook. This is kind of the most substantial of these 3 documents. The checklist literally is a checklist, right? Just make sure that each line item is addressed for the application. I will point out that the Wi-Fi hotspot zones are in an Excel file over here. They also exist as a tab in the workbook, but for your convenience, a separate Excel file is here. And this file here, this KMZ, is the KMZ of the polygons for the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. Okay. If you just click on it, downloads to your desktop, and you can open it up in Google Earth. This is simply the Wi-Fi hotspot zone polygons. And as you can see, they are in the 47 municipalities throughout the Commonwealth. Let's just take a quick look at one of them, just for the heck of it. I think we have a little bit of time, and I'm choosing one at random, completely at random. This seems to be perhaps one of the larger ones. And as you can see, to cover an area like this, so this one is obviously a ball field, and the intention here is to make Wi-Fi available to those in the stands attending the game, but not necessarily, it doesn't really need to be available on the field itself. Again, as you're visiting this site, if there's a need or a suggestion to optimize this, for example, maybe this little section is not necessary, but maybe this one is, we would definitely welcome that. But that's the KMZ file. Let's get rid of that. So let's have a look at the project workbook, because this is a little substantial, and I just want to make sure that we have an appropriate amount of time to go over this. Oops. Okay. So as you can see on the bottom, there are several tabs, right? So this will take a little bit of time to complete, but this is also the tool that we will use to collect most of the relevant information for the application. So we have tabs labeled 1 through 7. All of those tabs will require some input from applicants. And then the lettered tabs at the end are just for reference. We do not need to, you don't need to actually input any information here. This is a definition. Tab A is a definition of cost categories that we have installed in the workbook. We'll have a look at that in a moment. Capital costs as well as operational costs. And B is the locations, the Wi-Fi hotspot zones themselves. This is the same information that appears in the Excel file that's also available as a download. Okay, so tab 1, basic instructions. Very important to review the instructions prior to filling out the workbook. The instructions are per section, so 1, 2, 3, 4, these correspond to these sections. So perhaps you want to review the instructions for each section right before you complete each section. I think it would be very helpful. Tab number 1, basic information, you know, the name of the entity, the company applying, the name of the individual completing the workbook. We will have questions for you as we are reviewing your applications, right? There's going to be some questions. There might be requests for some additional information. As the RFP states, there might very well be the request for some level of remediation in the application. So whoever's contact information is listed here should be, you know, capable or at least aware that they could be contacted by us as we're reviewing the applications. You can use as many resources within the company to respond to questions, but we just don't want this single point of contact. A signature, an electronic signature from this individual acknowledging that they are certifying that they're aware that this application is being completed. All right. Tab number 2 are general questions, smaller text answers. So we separated this from the narrative document because the answers to these questions might be very brief, right? Might be just a sentence or two, short text answers, not really narrative. And most of these questions are relative to your experience operating broadband wireless networks, or simply to do with the operation of operating broadband wireless networks. So I won't go into anything too specific here. If you have any issues or any questions with this workbook or anything else, you know, there's the frequently asked questions option, and there's we'll make contact information available to you to be able to make sure that all your questions are answered. Tab number 3 is perhaps the most substantial tab in here. So here we want to know on a per site basis, basic information regarding each location. So this is pretty helpful in capturing information about sites such as towers or smart poles or what have you, and perhaps a little less helpful collecting information on paths, on backhaul paths. But we want you to enter as much information here as possible. Keeping in mind that we are also requiring GIS information, right? Points for locations and paths for backhaul and such. And we'll correlate this. We'll be able to look, refer to the GIS data and see what some of the specs are for this. The way this is set up is the location ID is available from a drop-down menu that corresponds to the location ID in this is called Annex A locations. So this is the location ID in question. And if you choose a particular location ID, a few of the other cells will self-populate. And you may have to go off editing for that. I think I have to go off of editing for that. Yeah, okay. So you choose location ID number 3. That's within the municipality of Aguadilla, and the site name for the purpose of this program is the Plaza San Antonio. If you would like to assign an optional name to it for your own internal purposes, that's fine. This column will be more appropriate when you enter additional supporting locations. So keep in mind that if you want to request funding for additional supporting locations, you do have to agree to operate the Wi-Fi hotspot zones that are specified for the municipality, all of them. So for example, in Aguadilla, there are 3, I'm pretty sure. So items number location ID 3, 4, and 5. Well, actually, we have 4 in Aguadilla, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so all of those would be, would be entered here. Now, keep in mind, these are Wi-Fi hotspot zones. We might need more than one Wi-Fi access point to serve the zones. And we are relying on the applicants to make that determination, how many access points and specifically where they will be mounted. So here on a location ID by location ID basis, so zone by zone, we would like you to identify how many access points are required. So just hypothetically, if this one is, I'm just going to make up a number, 3 wireless access points required there. What we would like you to do is then add, 3 line items for location ID 3. You can enter it again, right? And you can enter it again because you've mentioned that you have 3 wireless access points required. So please address each of the 3, right? So if you look over to the right, the type of information that we're looking for. So this is a required site. If it's a Wi-Fi hotspot zone, it's required. And if it's not a Wi-Fi hotspot zone, it would be additional. So all 3 of these would be required. And then we'll get into the backhaul section. So is it aerial fiber, buried fiber, or wireless? So you can see why we want you to divide these up on an access point by access point basis. Because, for example, maybe 2 of the 3 are going to be wireless backhaul. Maybe they're wireless backhaul back to the 3rd, which is then backhauled with aerial fiber. Or maybe all 3 of them are wireless backhaul. But here you can make that specification, and then we'll refer to the GIS information for a graphical representation of what's going on there. And we'll be able to better understand it. The route length pertains to, obviously, mostly to the fiber backhaul, but if it's a microwave backhaul to a particular tower location, you can include that as well. Obviously in the distance, you can choose what you're using, and resiliency and redundancy description, if you will, in terms of if there's more than one backhaul path or not. Then in the structure type, you can see utility pole, smart pole, tower. If it is a tower, you can describe in the description section. Is it a monopole? Is it a lattice tower? Rooftop, other, for example, sidewall. You would just put that in the description category. Height, that's to the structure category. For Wi-Fi specifications category, you can put your Wi-Fi hardware vendor or type, the technology, architecture, future upgrades. Is this just a yes or no path? That's just a yes or no. We do expect you to suggest, applicants to suggest over a 10-year operational period, a Wi-Fi upgrade path to Wi-Fi 7. And then some other technical issues in terms of network usage. This is to do with the Andrew, is this to do with the anticipated backhaul capabilities, or the retail service offering capabilities?
So yeah, these fields here would be to represent what would be sort of like the advertised speed of the actual Wi-Fi site, or maybe at a supplemental infrastructure site. So for the required locations, yeah, we would want you guys to list, what is your intended upload, max upload, max download speeds for all the users using the system. So
okay, thank you. And there's information on required capacity for peak usage times, the number of devices to support. That can be found in the RFP. So at least we're looking for the minimum specifications as described in the RFP, but you obviously can recommend anything more robust. So additional services, it's possible that you will have additional services at the Wi-Fi hotspot location, certainly not required. But as to that example earlier, if you plan on monetizing the space for small cell deployments, you might be able to say, yes, there will be a 4G service offering here or 5G. If you want to simply, if you want to say yes to these and in the narrative response suggests that, you have not yet secured a tenant for the 4G or 5G site, but you will make the space available, you can do that. So this is for additional services. Is it mobile? Is it fixed wireless? And of course, there's a section for power, right? Grid tie, generator, battery backup, solar. So you have a little discretion in how to fill this out. This is an example. If you were going to apply for location ID number 3 in Aguadilla, and you determine that 3 wireless access points are required, you put them there. There are 3 additional Wi-Fi access points in Aguadilla, and since you would be required to agree to operate all of them, if you want to seek additional funding in this particular municipio, then all of those would need to be listed. So you would then go on to list location number 4 and location number 5 as well. And I believe also location number 6 is also Aguadilla. All of these are required, right? So you could, you should be able to just do the little plus sign and drag it down, but however you want to manipulate the spreadsheet is fine. But I would like to see this populated in this format where but it's not required, but this is the recommended way to fill this out, where you, per municipality, you list all of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. All are required to be listed per municipality. You make the determination of the number of access points in each Wi-Fi zone that is required, and you list them out separately. And then after that, you go ahead and you list additional locations. And to do that, your additional locations do not have a location ID, obviously. These are determined by the applicant, but you can just go ahead and enter in Aguadilla. You can leave this blank. I would recommend adding a name, because there won't be a site name that you will inherit. This will be up to you. Then over here, of course, this will be listing an additional location, and then go ahead and fill out the applicable technical spec sections to the right. So for this, you might end up requesting funding for 5 locations in Aguadilla above the required hotspot locations, and you would just fill it out as such. Now, if you want to list all of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones up top, and then all of your additional Wi-Fi or additional areas on the bottom, that's fine too. But the way my brain works is I would like to see it on a municipality by municipality basis, list the required hotspot locations and then the additional locations per. And then you can move on to a different municipality after that.
We have one question regarding capacity. Probably directed towards Andrew from Anna. Anna, go ahead.
Yes, Andrew, my question is, in the documentation, you specify that there's a certain amount of users for indoor and outdoor. We understand that that's like a design minimum capacity. And the question is, what happens if after the recipient designs for that amount of users, at a certain point, there's more than that amount of users? Will that affect the way you qualify the performance of the recipient regarding complying with the requirements?
Yeah, great question. So that's basically just a minimum, right? So as we evaluate these applications as they come in, we're looking for these minimum requirements to be met. But if the applicant decides to exceed that requirement, we're all for it, right? And you're probably going to get higher rating points for that. So something to consider as you're putting together your proposal.
I think the question is more what happens in terms of quality of service, if there's more than what was designed for. Is there an impact on the ongoing, monitoring of the quality of the network.
So I'm gonna have to take that back, and we'll write something up in the frequently asked questions, give you more direction there. So
Yeah, I'll agree with Andrew on
Okay.
that. I'd like to, I think, we've been able to respond to most questions without saying we'll have to get back to you on that, but we might need to get back to you on that. I think that will have a little bit to do with the ongoing reporting obligations during the 10-year operating period, right? Where
Exactly.
the Commonwealth is going to want to, see how the Wi-Fi hotspots are performing. There might be a determination that they're being, too heavily utilized and the bandwidth does need to be increased. But I want to see what the language is as it currently exists in the RFP and just more carefully consider the answer to that question.
One more question from Efrain.
Okay. Thank
Hi, good afternoon. Related to that, one major roadblock to deliver the expected bandwidth will be interference with other access point devices. How should we deal with that? If even the municipalities have other Wi-Fi access point active there?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have discussed this internally quite a bit. So a few points. The Wi-Fi hotspot zones have been identified by the municipalities themselves. That doesn't necessarily mean that they identified locations that they were certain there would not be any interference from other Wi-Fi devices. So, but that's worth noting. The Wi-Fi hotspot zones are relatively small. You can see the example that we showed just a little bit ago. It's just the seating area of a baseball field. So it's relatively small. So the chances of another Wi-Fi service being active in that area is lower because it's a small area, and I think that's going to be part of the optimization process. So applicants are strongly encouraged to do field audits of the hotspot zone areas in the municipalities they're interested in, and to look for several things, right? The reasonableness of the area, the polygon, the perimeter, the shape of it, and also the presence of any existing signal that would interfere with the Wi-Fi zone as currently specified. It's not something that we were able to address comprehensively before launching this program, right? We didn't do comprehensive field audits to each site to look for the presence of an existing Wi-Fi system. But I would say that let's try to deal with that as aggressively as possible during the so-called optimization opportunity. Okay, let me go through the rest of these tabs just so we're clear here. I think the rest of them are perhaps a little bit more straightforward. This is just the one that will get a little busy. The capital budget tab, as the name implies, this is where you enter in all of your eligible costs. The total of this will be the dollar amount you are seeking funding for. So infrastructure type, again, required or additional, right? Just is this part of one of the Wi-Fi hotspot zones or is it not? Keep in mind that for the Wi-Fi hotspot zones, backhaul infrastructure that leaves the polygon, that goes somewhere, obviously it's backhaul, it's got to go somewhere. That would be in the required Wi-Fi category, even though it traverses outside of the Wi-Fi zone. Cost category, these are the cost categories that we have pre-populated with. The definitions of these are in tab letter A. If nothing cleanly fits in any of these categories, just choose other and offer a small description of what that would be over here. Okay, unit cost, unit type, quantities, total, capital costs. On the RFP, you'll see a list of eligible costs and a list of ineligible costs. And also, of course, the cost category in the drop-down menu will be helpful there. Same thing or very similar with the operating budget. So this is where all of your operating costs come in, including cost of transit, cost of bandwidth, for the Wi-Fi hotspot zones. And again, the cost categories are predefined with an option for other. And the definitions of these categories are in tab letter A. What we would like to see here is, this itemize this as much as you can per the Wi-Fi hotspot zones as well as the additional infrastructure zones. We realize this is the perhaps one of the trickier ones, and yes, we are asking for this quarterly out 10 years because 10 years is the period of performance for the operations of the Wi-Fi zones. Tab 6 is projected revenue, so similar to operating expenses, we would like to see this quarterly for a 10-year period. And in terms of source of revenue, you have a little discretion here, but we would like to see this itemized out in a reasonable, logical format, right? We don't want to have one simple, average revenue per user summary here, right? Break this out in terms of, whether it's, if it's fixed wireless, perhaps one category for fixed wireless, although you could separate that out for various service tiers within fixed wireless. Same thing for mobile. If you plan on monetizing backhaul or monetizing power or monetizing space, then we would like to see those broken out as well. But you have a little discretion here. We would like to see as much detail as is reasonable.
David, you have a question? David Ruiz?
Yep. Just one quick question. So basically, in order to get a revenue, the infrastructure that we have to build is not going to be only for the free Wi-Fi, because the Wi-Fi is going to be free, so we are not going to get any revenue for that. So the infrastructure that we are going to build is going to be used to other end users, then we can get a new revenue. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's my question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And tab number 7, which is the final tab that will require input. This tab mostly self-populates. So from the previous 3 tabs, everything that is in white, that is not shaded in this light blue color, will populate from previous tabs. But everything that is in the light blue gray shaded area is are cells that you should input information if applicable. If it's not applicable, leave it blank. But if this is applicable to your project and your financial situation, then certainly input this data here. Again, this is quarterly for the 10-year period of time. If anyone, in the interest of time, because we are getting close to 4, so if anyone has any questions specifically on any of these line items, especially anything that has a required input, required if it's applicable to you, let's take them offline, send an email to us directly, and we can provide any additional information regarding that. So that's the project workbook. As long as we have a little bit of time, I'll take the opportunity and have a quick look at the narrative template. Again, you click on the link, it downloads to your desktop. Just open it up, save it on your computer, save it on your network. Once it's complete, then you'll be able to upload it back into the online application portal. So as I mentioned earlier, there's basically 3 buckets for deliverables: the project workbook, which we just looked at, attachments such as GIS files and other types of attachments that are clearly listed in the RFP, and narrative responses to certain questions and topics. And this is simply a template to assist in providing the narrative. So we've gone through the RFP. We've identified everything that requires a narrative response. We put a subject heading for it. This will be a little repetitive to the information that you supplied in the workbook. But here you can see there's simply a placeholder for various things that are to be addressed in the narrative. So just cut and paste or insert your text, your narrative response, just in line right here. Maybe use a different font, maybe use, you know, italics or what have you. It doesn't really matter. We'll know what part is your new content. And as you can see, there's simply a placeholder for everything that requires a narrative response. We just wanted to make it a little bit more simple. And the checklist document, as the name suggests, is very simple, although it's nearly 5 megs. And as you can see, this is quite literally just a checklist, right? So this is section 1 for the narrative. Just, you know, check off as you've completed those sections in the narrative document. And this is optional, so you can add this to the narrative document if you want. If you need to just offer any written explanation about any network components, you know, perhaps you're concerned that some of the GIS information might not be self-explanatory. Some of the information on that one tab on the workbook where all the access point locations are listed, maybe that's you feel that needs a little additional explanation. This is your opportunity to do that. Checklist for the project workbook, obviously it's just sections tabs 1 through 7. And then the supporting documents. So required documents, you know, you have to attach documents that satisfy these requirements. And then there are some optional supporting documents that you could choose to apply or to attach to your application as well. All right. Any additional questions?
We've had some questions come up on the chat that I've been answering some of them, and they'll be recorded, I guess. We got David Bogardi, another question. Dave.
Yeah, I figured if there's a little time at the end. I'm just kind of in my mind, I'm looking if there's, let's say 78 municipalities. Each one I think does it have around 3 spots per municipality or 3?
Approximately.
So if you divide it out, are you guys looking at then that's about less than $1 million per municipality? Or you're not really thinking of it that way, but as we kind of plan and guide out, should we be thinking in our mind, okay, so let's plan something, but our, you know, a little under $1 million is kind of the target?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
I think it's 600 and some odd thousand actually, so yeah.
Got it. That's helpful.
I think like many grant programs, but not all, we are really interested to see the type of response, the type of proposals, the potential impact that the program will have. And it's certainly plausible that, you know, funding decisions based on program performance will be made going forward, you know, one direction or the other, right? I mean, I would be a little surprised if it was a reduction of available funding, and I would not be so surprised if it was an increase in available funding. It really depends on program performance.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Anyone else? ¿Alguna otra pregunta que quieran hacer en español? I guess not.
Well, we had robust questions during the body of the presentation, and I want to thank everyone for that. I'm not kidding. I thought the quality of the questions was really excellent. Some very important points. You certainly made my job a little easier because I neglected to include a few of those points in the presentation, but I'm really glad that they were asked and we had the opportunity to discuss them in the question format.
We do have the email address, right, for additional questions, Waldo?
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
here, I'll share my desktop very quickly once again. So the frequently asked questions are listed here. You have to expand it with that. And then here's the FAQ at smartisland.pr.gov. And you know, as we receive these and answer them, those will be posted here chronologically, just added to the bottom. I would suggest, although we maybe put a date, like new Q&A answer here. In addition to that, I'm going to just go ahead and put my email address in the chat. Because I don't get nearly enough emails, and I want more. But if anyone has any questions.
Fred, why don't we maintain the formality of the frequently asked questions, because that's going through a distribution list. That way it will be going to all of us and you're included in it. Okay. At the same time, we can keep track and a log of the questions and make sure. So you will be getting them directly. So just to share that with you. So
perfect. I appreciate that, Waldo. Thank you very much.
You're still sharing your screen, Fred.
I hate when I do that. Yeah, so if I'm on the distribution list to the FAQ at smartisland.gov email address, then yes, please send your questions. In particular, anything to do with the workbook, prior to starting to fill that out. It's certainly easier to get answers before you start. But I would say, great starting point here would be to consider the opportunity and field visits to the Wi-Fi hotspot zones as listed are, I think, vital, right? I would be shocked if anyone proceeded with applying for funding here without going to lay eyes on the Wi-Fi hotspot zones in particular. It's up to you. It's just a very strong suggestion to do so. And and if you have questions regarding those zones and anything in particular, the FAQ email address is also the way to address those, at least at the beginning.
You want to close us off?
Yes, basically, thank everyone for attending. Big group, good participation, very good questions like Fred mentioned. So looking forward to these proposals, and obviously make sure that if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we will address them as early as possible. And we'll obviously will be presented for the benefit of the group within the Smart Island website for everyone's benefit. So thank you again all. And I think it's a great first meeting, and hopefully will be the first of many.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Buenas tardes, gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. Buenas tardes.
Chao, chao.
Buenas tardes. Bye.
Thank you.
Gracias, buenas tardes.
Bye.
Gracias, buenas tardes.